Hey there, everybody. I wanted to offer a video on how to work the 12 steps in a very condensed fashion. I often teach people that I work with on how to do this because what it does is it helps us to free ourselves from the stinking thinking and the emotions that cause us to be restless, irritable, discontent, judgmental, resentful, and fearful. All of those things, which basically block us from joy, peace, contentment, and everything that we say we want. So, I'm going to give you an example of how to work the steps, and I will do my best to uh, be articulate about it. So we can use a very personal example, or we can use a global issue that really gets us. So I'm going to take you through the steps using the frustration and pain and sadness that we all feel around the violence happening in our world and the divisiveness and the school shootings specifically. Okay. And what I see oftentimes on Facebook is people arguing about what is right, what are the right answers to deal with such violence, and what are the laws that need to get passed, so on and so forth. But the reality is, we need to deal with ourselves. How do we do that? How do we get past the emotions? I'm not saying that we are trying to move to be heartless and unfeeling, but really, how can we get to a place where we are dispassionate and compassionate at the same time? So, dispassionate means I'm not being run by my emotions. I might have them, but I'm not going to be run by them, and I'm not going to lash out and be judgmental of other people, because the reality is we've all walked in each other's shoes in some way, shape, or form. Compassion is, understanding pain and choosing to send, offer, and express love. So when we're fighting on social media, we're not being compassionate. We're not adding love and condolences and support. We're creating more negative and violent energy. So this is how we can deal with that. First of all, it's a practice. Working the steps on a daily basis is a practice, and it is for everyone. And the purpose of it is to reach a place of peace and contentment so that we can truly contribute to the world. Now, we all have our dark sides, we all have our shadows, we all have our flaws, we all have our bad behaviors, our patterns, our habits, our addictions. So, once again, this is all with the message of progress, not perfection. There's no reason to dredge up shame when we fall back into those things. That shame is not going to help us move forward and away from those tendencies, those negative tendencies. So let's start off. When I first heard about the school shooting, my whole body shriveled inside. I actually started to feel a wave of depression come over me, and started like ruminating thoughts, anxious thoughts, fear thoughts about my children's safety, about the conditions of the world, about what's going to happen. It also opened the floodgates of all the other previous violent events that have heard about and experienced, just like you have, that happen across our world every single day. These things have been going on from the beginning of time. violence in all kinds of atrocious ways, shapes, and forms by all kinds of people, because of all different reasons. But the primary reason is that hurt people hurt people. Even if it seems like to be the most purest form of evil, it's because they are so wounded and lost. Have I ever done something that was so unkind? Or have I ever thought something that was so unkind? That's darkness, right? So, can I relate to when people reach a place of desperation, ignorance, hopelessness, whatever that may be, that has led them to choices that they've made? So, how do I work the steps? So, step one, my life is powerless, or my life is unmanageable. And I have no control is basically step one, right? I have to admit that. That's hard. Many of us are fighters. Many of us want to proceed through life, figuring out how to fix it, what to do, and we become very kind of rigid in our thinking. So I have to admit, I am powerless over the world. I'm powerless over what people, places, and things do. I'm powerless over these children who are broken because of our collective societal dysfunction, and how, we all are, trying to walk through life, and, maybe failing our kids collectively on some way, through our whatever's happening educationally, whatever's happening in the mental health field. So I'm powerless over that. What do I have power over? I just have power over me. That's it. So can we admit that we are powerless over things, people, places, and things? We are powerless. Even if we pass laws, not to say I'm not making a position for a law or no law, but even if we did pass laws, it doesn't necessarily mean that our children are going to be safe. I am powerless over people, places, and things. Step two, came to believe a power greater than me could help, right? Came to believe that there's something bigger than me that can help. Well, Lord knows I haven't solved the world's problems. Lord knows I can't fix that, though in my head, when I feel grandiose, I think, oh, well, this is what should happen, and this is what should happen. If only they did this, and if only she did that, and if only he did this, and what about this? No, I'm powerless. There's only something bigger than me. I'm just this little tiny person who has a mind, who has a mouth, who has contributions to offer our world, yes, but I am still powerless over this situation. I'm powerless over the gun laws. I am powerless over the mental health of all human beings. I am powerless. Is there something bigger than me that can help? I believe so. I am choosing to have faith in that. And I will call that power God. I will call that power love. I will call that power hope. I will call that power universal wisdom. I believe in all of that. You can choose to call that higher power whatever you want. It does not matter. Can you believe in it is what's necessary. So, yes, I believe that there is something bigger than me in the universe, in the world, wherever, that can help. Okay. So my original issue is that I am resentful, sad, and fearful, and it's causing me distress. And now I'm working the steps. I'm powerless over that. I'm powerless over the feelings that I'm feeling because they got so heavy and difficult to manage. And now I believe something is bigger than me that can help. Okay. The next Step 3 is made a decision to turn my life over to the care of that power. I say I believe. Now I have to make a decision to turn it over, to surrender, to stop being in my stinking thinking and stop acting through my acting out from my stinking thinking about it, and stop rolling in the emotions of it all and saying, okay, I'm turning this over to you, higher power, whoever, whatever you are, I'm turning it over to you. So every time that stinking thinking or that urge to do something about this comes up, I pause. That's hard, but that's what we do. We pause. Okay. And I turn it over. I say, I'm giving it to you, love. I'm giving it to universal wisdom. I'm giving it to you, God. I'm giving it to you, whoever, whatever. Step 4, we do a fearless moral inventory to look at our part here in this in carrying this resentment and this fear. So the fearless moral inventory goes like this. And it takes time to learn these steps, and it takes time to practice these steps and to become efficient in them. And I'll go through this quickly for you. So we write down our resentment or our fear, and usually they both come together. We're usually, if we are resentful, it's because we have a lot of fear and we're being driven by fear. Anger and hurt and disappointment, all that resentment is still all just fear. So I feel angry and hurt by the violence in the world and the fact that these broken people are out there doing horrible things to innocent children. I feel awful about that. Okay, what does this affect? This affects my sense of security, my emotional security, maybe my financial security, because those feelings can really zap my energy, and it may cause me not to perform well in my work or not want to go to work. It may cause depression. And so I need to acknowledge that it can also affect my financial security, emotional security. It can affect my personal relations. If I'm walking around feeling depressed, sad, angry about what's happened, that's going to have an impact on my personal relations. Is it going to affect my self-esteem? Yes, it's going to affect my self-esteem because I am not operating optimally. So look at all these areas that this affects. We're just acknowledging that carrying this resentment and fear has a huge impact on our ability to be our truer, higher, optimal selves, healthier selves, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So we've recognized what all is being affected by having these resentments and fears. Now we're going to have a look at, oh, and is there fear involved in those in that resentment? Yes, you check that box. Yes, there is fear involved. The fear is that my kids aren't safe. The fear that is that, something could happen. The fear is that the world is always going to be at, a violent place. The fear is that I'm not okay. We're not okay. Lots of fear, right? And we can have that show up in all kinds of different statements for each one of us. The fear is that this could happen to my kids, obviously. We all have that fear at this point. So I'm powerless. I'm turning it over. I recognize I'm powerless. I'm turning it over. I do my fearless moral inventory. I recognize the impact of carrying this fear and these resentments. And I go ahead and I say a prayer. Now, again, your higher power is whoever you want it to be. You can call this prayer an intention. You can call this prayer setting out energy into the universe. Call it whatever you want, just like you can call God or your higher power whatever you want. It does not matter. Everything is energy, and we all affect the collective energy with our thoughts and our intentions. So we say this prayer: God, higher power, please save me from my anger, and please direct my attention to what you would have me be. We also say the prayer: God, please help me to grant all involved, all the people involved, the shooter, the government, the divisiveness and fighting on social media, please help me to grant them all the same pity, patience, and tolerance I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Very, very important. So, the last line is, perhaps they're sick like me. That is such a very important point. So please help me to grant them the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Perhaps they're sick like me. That is the prayer, the intention. So pity, patience, and tolerance. So pity is, now nobody likes to be pitied, but let's move away from the insults aspect of pity. Let's look at pity in that, we all need to understand that we have all been in a place where we have acted out of selfishness and out of fear, right? We have all done harms at some point. We have all been driven by selfishness and fear at some point. And we can all relate on some level to feeling a mental block, an emotional block, a spiritual deficit of some kind, a void within, going through a bad period in our lives where we have felt like, wow, that was not my best self. Oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Hopefully, we have, if you're listening to this, the likelihood that you have recognized that is with you. So we have all been there. So can I offer them, kind of see them with the same pity that I can see myself with in those moments where I am just blind, I am ignorant, I am being emotionally driven. Can I just give them a break, give myself a break and say, and I know it's harder with violent acts that we're talking about, but we have to be able to see our powerlessness over our own emotions and our own behaviors at times that we act out with, and we have to admit those in order to admit how maybe somebody who is way more hurting than we are could get to that place of such a horrific act. So can I grant them pity? Can I grant them patience? Can I say, okay, our collective humanity is really struggling. It is absolutely struggling. There is a lot of violence in the world. Can I say, instead of getting divisive and angry and argumentative and blaming and shaming and all of that, can I say, okay, can I be patient? What can I bring to the table? Does it help when I'm all of those other things, angry and blaming? No, it does not help. Why am I being angry and blaming? Why? What am I getting out of that? Am I feeling superior with my anger and blame? Am I rolling around in it like it's gossip? Am I using it to hold myself back from being accountable for my own life? There's lots of reasons we do that, why we stay in anger and blame. Patience and tolerance. Can we be tolerant of each other? So God help me to grant them the same pity, patience, and tolerance I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. So to acknowledge that when somebody does this, they are in sickness, even if it looks like intentional evil. It is a sickness. They have the sickness of darkness. They have a sickness. So perhaps they're sick like me. That is so important to set ourselves free from fear and resentment. We have to recognize that each one of us as human beings come with two parts, a very human part that acts from a lower nature and a very divine part. And many of us are not so blessed to have found that divine, sacred, good-natured part. And especially when we're in our sickness, especially when we come into this world and experience mental illness or abuse or trauma. And we're not taught, we're not exposed to the answers and to the solutions and to the resources. That's how a brain develops, so, and is shaped. So we need to understand that, we have our lower nature too. And though my violence is not in the same horrifying form, but I have had thoughts about myself and others, angry thoughts that were violent. Not that I wanted to slaughter them, I didn't want to do that, but violence is violence. Aren't we all violent every day? We need to practice nonviolence in our thoughts and in our choices and in our actions. So perhaps he's sick like me. Can I recognize that I have sickness in me when I am not connected to my true, good-natured, true self? Yes, that's what it is. It's sickness. Sometimes it's selfishness, which is a sickness. Sometimes it's greed, which is a form of sickness. Sometimes it's lust, which is a form of sickness. Sometimes it's vanity, which is a form of sickness. Sometimes it's fear, is a form of sickness. When we are not in our higher natured self, our divine self, our God self, whatever you want to call it, we are in a lower self, operating from greed, fear, and selfishness, attachment. So we must remember that. Perhaps he's sick like me. I know what it feels like to be in that place. It's a horrible feeling. Then I look at my selfishness. So then we look at the five flaws that every human being has, especially when we're living in resentment and fear. Okay, we're still in step 4, by the way. So then we look at our selfishness. Our selfishness is, I want the world to be perfect. Now, some of the selfishness sounds like, yeah, of course I want the world to be, heaven on earth. Of course I want utopia. Of course I want nonviolence. Most people would agree with me, right? It's still selfish. The word selfishness in the 12 steps is different than, has a deeper, more spiritual meaning to it than the average moment that we might use the word selfish, although both can happen. So selfish is like, I just want what I want. I want goodness. That's still selfish. I want the world to be nonviolent. That's still selfish. I want people to grow and heal. That's still selfish. I want what I want. You can want good things, and then according to the 12 steps, it's still a form of selfishness. Why? Because it's not accepting what is, and it's keeping me in fear and anger, and it's preventing me from being happy, joyous, and free, and from contributing to the world in the best way that I can, and being a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem, and crying and being depressed and blaming and feeling hopeless. I need to get to my my understanding of my selfishness. I want things to go my way because I think my way is the right way, instead of understanding that there is a divine mystery unfolding and I don't have control over it, and all I can do is my part. And it's an opportunity for me to love, and it's an opportunity for me to be an example of not divisiveness, but of forgiveness and of understanding, of patience and tolerance. So my selfishness is that I want the world to be different. Oh boy, that was a big one for me. I want the world to be different. I couldn't handle that I couldn't accept the world as it was. I was on a mission to change it until I realized I had to change myself. All right. So I can list a million selfish things that around this issue of the shootings. I can definitely list a million selfish things, but I think you've got my point. The next one is dishonesty. The next flaw that we all have is dishonesty. And a lot of us would say, I'm not dishonest, just like we would say, I'm not selfish. No, we're dishonest, especially when we're living in resentment and fear. That is a form of dishonesty. So, how am I being dishonest here? Well, I'm saying that the world can be, that I have control over this, and that people should do what I say they should do. That's dishonest. That's not true. I don't have control over that. This is not my universe. This is not my earth. This is not my humanity. All I have control over is me. So by holding on to resentment and fear, I am acting as if I should be God, that I should be in charge of everyone's mind and body, and everyone's journey, and everyone's evolution, and everyone's life and death. No, I have no control over that. Holding on to resentment and fear only disrupts what I have to offer. Being a person that wakes up and says, thank you, and what can I contribute today? Rather than a person that wakes up and says, oh my gosh, I don't like this. How can I change it? And how can I change you? And also, what can I get? What do I get to have? So there's a lot of dishonesty in carrying this resentment and this fear. The dishonesty that any one politician is responsible. The dishonesty that we know when we're writing something and saying, this is how it has to happen, this is what's gonna work, is the answer. The answer is, honestly, be the change we want to see in the world. Stop blaming the world and do what we have to do. Send love. Know that our energy, our thoughts, our actions make a difference. Say a prayer, send love, have belief and hope and faith. Pray for the people that are lost and suffering and hurting to the point where they're being violent toward themselves and toward others. There's a million dishonesties that I can list in all of this, but I'm going to stop there for the sake of time. After dishonesty, we look at our self-seeking behaviors. So self-seeking is, where I am doing things to kind of feed my emotions. It's all about me, the little me, not the higher self me, but the ego me, the me that gets high or angry on being emotional, even if it's sadness. I'm feeding that. So it's self-seeking, rather than being of coming out into the world as like, what can I contribute here? This is an awful thing that's happened. What can I contribute? Instead of my opinions and my arguments, or my depression, or my fear, or my panic, what can I contribute? So, what do I do to be self seeking? I roll around in my depression. I gossip about it. I fight. Blame people. These are all behaviors that cause me to stay in resentment and fear. I'm spoon feeding the devil, resentment and fear. And then we have inconsideration. Inconsideration doesn't mean like, let's just be considerate, be kind, be a nicey pants person. It is being inconsiderate means that we're not looking at the big picture here. We're not looking at the level of pain that is out there in the world. So many people who are acting out in violence are acting out in violence from a place of ignorance and pain and lack of resources and lack of true knowledge. So we're also being inconsiderate of the positions that people are being placed into, politicians and maybe education officials or whoever that everybody is bashing and blaming or placing this huge responsibility on, and we're actually all responsible for creating a violent world, because we have violent thoughts and we make violent choices every day when we act out in negative behaviors and thought and actions. And you might want to say, no, well, I'm not that bad. We're still contributing to it, and we are all responsible for what we create together. So we all have to do our part and bring love and compassion and forgiveness and speak to the soul of somebody rather than to our selfishness or from our selfishness. So that's in consideration. And the final flaw is fear, being fearful. Most of us are operating from a place of fear all the time. So fear is, I am fearful. I am carrying this resentment and, because I am fearful. I am fearful that I can't handle being in a world that is like this. It causes me depression. I'm afraid that my kids aren't safe. I'm afraid that I will never get my way and the world will never be okay. I'm afraid to leave the house. I'm afraid that my kids are not just unsafe in school, but they're just unsafe in the world. I'm afraid, and I can list a million fears that are controlling me and once again, spoon feeding that resentment. So God, please, here's my final prayer, which I said accidentally before. So God, please send, God, higher power, whatever, universe, energy of love, please save me from my anger and direct my attention to what you would have me be instead. So here I noted through this work, through this self-reflection, my selfishness, my dishonesty, my self-seeking behaviors, my inconsideration, and my fears. So I noticed those 5 things. Within those 5 things are subcategories of characteristic traits about me that I tend to exhibit often. So, for example, when I am expressing opinions that are divisive, perhaps I'm in my arrogance. Arrogance is another form of selfishness or anger, right? When I'm expressing my opinions or if I'm in depression, perhaps I am expressing my selfishness because I'm not getting what I want. My life hasn't been or isn't what I want it to be, right? So it's just another form. All those other subtopics, those subcharacteristics of selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, self-seeking, and fearful. They're all of those negative characteristics we all have. We all have to own it. So direct your my attention to what you would have me be instead. And this is the point in the process that we sit and we be quiet and we listen and we get still and we listen. What would I be instead of selfish? What should I be instead of dishonest? What should I be instead of self-seeking? What should I be instead of inconsiderate? What should I be instead of fearful? And I listen for that voice within when I'm quiet, and I listen for direction. And this is me developing a connection and a reliance on my higher self, my God self, my divine self. And I listen. Maybe I will hear, be compassionate. Maybe I will hear, write a letter to someone who needs encouragement. Maybe I will hear, be of service. Maybe I will hear, spread a message of positivity. Whatever. Maybe I will hear, be humble. Maybe I will hear, be forgiving. Maybe I will hear, be faithful. I don't know. That's for each one of us to sit still and listen for. So I've prayed and now I meditate. Meditation is being in the stillness. And the meditation helps to wash away the stuff that doesn't serve. And sometimes we will hear in a very clear way, be this, be that, do this, do that. And sometimes it just washes the negative energy away, just being quiet and still. So there we've completed, after we've listened and heard our message and our directive from our higher self, then we move on to step 5. And that is, after writing this fearless moral inventory, we go and share it with somebody. And we explain to them, where we were at. And we ask them to just kind of bear witness to where we were at and maybe offer their 2 cents about it. But somebody that you trust, somebody that has a connection with a higher self, a higher being, a higher energy, whatever, and ask, that they just bear witness, and they may or may not have something to say to you in reply, because that might be an opportunity to hear more from your higher power if you go to somebody that you trust, a spiritual a person who practices the virtues and values that we all say that we appreciate and attempt to live by. So then I go ahead from step 5 and I look at step 6, and I recognize my character defects, right? I want to make sure that I don't have step 6 and 7 as well imprinted in my mind as I would like to. Let's see. Anyway, it's acknowledging our character flaws and saying, like, okay, kind of making a list of what our character flaws are, and in this situation. And so getting familiar with our shadow self, and saying, okay, well, I tend to be very opinionated, and I know that can be a problem for a lot of people. I tend to be very arrogant at times. I feel like I'm a know-it-all at times. And so I really, know that I need to be more humble. Let's see. I tend to be fearful. I'm writing a list of these flaws so that I can really recognize how they're showing up in my life, so I can be on more alert, and truly aware and mindful of them every day, so that I can go ahead and start making changes in my life and being more accountable, I'm sorry, I'm looking down. I'm still looking for the page where the 12 steps are. And for whatever reason, I cannot remember what page it's on. So, so then we recognize those flaws, and then we, I know it's in How It Works somewhere, isn't it? We recognize those flaws, and then we recognize that also, because we all as human beings have a lower nature and a higher nature, we recognize that though many of us work on correcting those flaws very often, that sometimes we, it's very hard to change habits. And so step 7 is about turning those flaws over to God again. So once again, we're turning those flaws over. We're praying for the relief and the freedom from those flaws that keep us cycling in our lower nature, keep us from living a intentional, loving, purposeful life, and a life of being of service to others, and freeing ourselves from our egos, which are so create our suffering. Bottom line, our egos create our suffering, and our egos are what get angry and resentful and fearful. So I finally found the page. Sorry it took so long. So we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That's step 6. Okay. And step 7 is humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Same thing. What I just said. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So in this case of this one resentment, who have I hurt? Have I incited fear in other people? Have I incited anger in other people? Have I spread anger and fear by the way I'm handling this? Have I been absent in my family's lives because I've been so consumed with this, and I am not contributing my better self to my day and to the people that I come across? Who have I harmed by carrying this resentment? Have I harmed myself? Have I harmed who of others have I harmed? And so I make that list. And then step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So then I go and I make amends. I call people, I post something new, I do something to not apologize, but to change my behaviors and to acknowledge my wrong. It's not an apology. It's, I recognize that I did this. And yes, I am sorry. And this is what I want to do to right my wrong. So transforming the energy that I put out there and the harm that I caused. And also then asking the people that I have harmed for forgiveness, and what we can do to do better, to be better, and to transform that energy of harm. And so that's step 9. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So now that I've been through this fearful and resentful inventory based on school shootings, on a daily basis, when I see a post or in social media, or I hear a conversation or somebody tries to talk to me about it, or perhaps another event happens, on a daily basis, I must keep revisiting my inventory and making sure that I don't spiral backwards and go backwards. I need to keep vigilant with this practice of taking ownership for my attitude and my energy in the world, of being the change that I want to see. I want a world of nonviolence, then I need to be nonviolent. I need to be nonviolent. I need to practice step 10 by taking my personal inventory, by continuing to watch my flaws and shortcomings, to taking ownership of what I contribute, What am I contributing? Am I contributing from my lower nature, or am I contributing from my higher nature? What am I offering people? What am I giving? Am I giving inspiration, or am I feeding hatred? Am I giving my opinions, or am I being an example of goodness truly when no one's watching? Am I being violent toward myself because of addiction or judgments? Because if I am, I'm not working step 10. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So I'm going to say that again. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve, or I'm going to say that even less from a religious place. Sought through intention and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher self as we understand our higher self, praying only for the knowledge asking only for the knowledge of our higher self's will for us, not our ego will, but our higher self will, our divine will, because all human beings have a divine, good-natured, true place of truth within, asking for that and that power and the power to carry out that will rather than our selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, self-seeking, and fearful desires, really, or perspectives. So asking for our higher self to step forward and take action rather than allowing our lower self. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. So this is, yes, if we work that inventory and we work these steps, a spiritual awakening can happen every minute of the day by taking ownership and contributing to the world in the way that we say we want to contribute. Okay? And as a result of getting humble and taking ownership of what I am contributing to the world, am I contributing goodness? Am I contributing love? Am I doing that in a real way, or am I doing that in a selfish way? Am I doing that for accolades? Am I doing that for selfish fulfillment and desires? Or am I doing that to truly contribute to peace and nonviolence and love in the world? So as I work these steps, I will continue to be reminded of my higher nature, my spiritual awakening. I will continue to do that. And I will carry this message, it says, carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So, of course, the 12 steps are derived from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but these steps are a way of life for all beings. It takes us from being a lower self, animal instinct driven human being to a higher self. And when, of course, back in the day when good old Bill Wilson, along with his team wrote this book, they were talking about the disease of alcoholism, and it's a very real disease, but we all have it. We all have it because it's truly the disease of selfishness, anger, and fear. When we operate from those places, the symptom of drinking is just a symptom to cover up all that noise in our heads and to deny it and to continue to stay in victimhood and blame and to justify our actions, our anger and our fear and our desire to control and be God, play God, to be opinionated, to matter in that way, rather than rising and doing the work to raise our vibration, to raise to a higher natured self, a purified self. So in a way, we're all alcoholics. We all have that self that turns to people, places, and things to numb out, to blame, to to intoxicate ourselves with, to lose ourselves, to avoid our higher nature. And so when we have this spiritual awakening by living the steps, we can carry the message to all people and help all people, and be an example by using this practice of the 12 steps, just as an example, not to go out and preach and tell people what they're supposed to be doing, but to change your life and be so attractive with your light and your compassion that you can then inspire others to do the same. And they might want to hear your story as to how you got there. So thank you for listening. I took much longer than I wanted to, but it's such an important practice. It's such a powerful, valuable practice. And I know that for me, I've had a lot of people help me understand these steps, and so grateful to every single one of them, to be able to then pass it along to my clients and to whoever else might find it beneficial. I hope that if you have any questions, you won't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And I know that when I work these steps, I feel free, and I feel free from depression. I feel free from anxiety. I feel free from anger. I feel free from my emotions. I plan to do another talk on dispassion and compassion, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation. I feel like when I work these steps and I do my other self-care practices, of raising my mind, my thoughts to a higher state of being, my higher natured self, I am happy and free, and I get to be helpful to others in a much more sincere way, not in a codependent way. And so at some point, I have a lot to share, and because I feel like I've been given so much and I want to give it back. And I again, thank you for listening. If you hung in there to the end, I know it was a lot, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just drop them below. Take care. Bye.